The stars had never seemed so distant. For centuries, humanity on Earth had looked up at the night sky, filled with wonder, but also ignorance. While civilizations across the galaxy flourished in peace, Earth remained a curious, youthful planet, a mere speck in the vastness of the cosmos. Its people were unaware of the complex web of politics, alliances, and wars that wove through the galaxy, thinking themselves too insignificant to be of interest to the advanced species of the universe. Earth was simply too far, too undeveloped, to be a threat or an ally. Then, the Korath arrived. The first signs of the invasion were subtle. An inexplicable power surge in the Pacific, a series of electromagnetic pulses that knocked out satellites, and strange atmospheric disturbances that scientists couldn't explain. At first, the global community attributed it to natural phenomena, a freak series of solar flares, or even an anomaly caused by Earth's own weather systems. But soon, the truth became undeniable. A fleet of black ships, sleek and menacing, appeared in Earth's orbit. Their designs were unfamiliar, their technology beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. With no warning, the Korath launched their attack. The first wave was swift and merciless. Earth's military, still recovering from years of peace, was caught off guard. Major cities were reduced to rubble within hours. In New York, a shimmering beam of light descended from the sky, annihilating entire blocks, while in Paris, the Eiffel Tower crumbled under the weight of alien energy blasts. Governments scrambled to react, but their response was slow and ineffective. The Korath's weapons were too powerful, their tactics too precise. Within the first 24 hours, most of Earth's defenses had been overwhelmed. The Korath didn't waste time with diplomacy or demands. They attacked with a single, ruthless objective: total domination. As panic spread, humans did what they did best: survive. The panic quickly turned to chaos as people fled their homes, searching for safety. But nowhere on Earth was safe. Communication networks were crippled. The global military forces tried to mobilize, but many were simply unable to respond in time. The Korath's technology was far superior to anything humanity had developed. Their soldiers, towering figures encased in dark, armored exosuits, descended on Earth like locusts. With unrelenting precision, they wiped out humanity's first lines of defense. Cities burned, the sky darkened with smoke, and the planet was plunged into chaos. However, amidst the devastation, something extraordinary happened. Humanity refused to give in. In underground bunkers, the remnants of Earth's military began to regroup. While their technology was antiquated compared to the Korath, human soldiers had something their invaders did not: the will to fight. When the first Korath assault team arrived in the remnants of Chicago, expecting to crush the last pockets of resistance, they encountered something unexpected: human ingenuity. A team of engineers, led by a military officer named Captain Sarah Avery, had developed a rudimentary form of counterattack, a series of improvised explosive devices, magnetic pulses, and even makeshift electromagnetic weapons. It wasn't much, but it worked. When the Korath troops advanced on their position, the humans launched a series of hit-and-run attacks, ambushing the invaders with guerrilla tactics. The Korath, so used to overwhelming force, were caught off guard. They had underestimated Earth's ability to adapt. It wasn't a victory, not by a long shot. The Korath pushed forward, relentless in their campaign. But for the first time, humanity had shown that they weren't an easy target. Around the globe, the resistance began to grow. In Paris, former military leaders rallied together, forming a unified force. In London, scientists and civilians alike worked together to build crude weapons from the wreckage of their cities. And in Australia, survivors took to the outback, preparing for a war they never thought they would have to fight. The Korath had awakened a ferocity in humanity that would not be easily extinguished. The universe had underestimated Earth. What they didn't know, what the Korath didn't know, was that humanity had something far more powerful than technology or superior weaponry. They had a will to survive that no force in the galaxy could ever truly crush. Earth wasn't just a planet to be conquered. It was a home, and humanity would fight to the last to protect it. And so, Earth's war began, not just to survive, but to prove that no invader could come to its doorstep and expect an easy victory. The Korath had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and they would soon learn that doing so would be their downfall. In the aftermath of the initial onslaught, Earth's cities lay in ruins. The once bustling metropolises reduced to smoldering craters. The global response was disjointed at first. Nations that had long been fractured now faced an unprecedented crisis. It was only in the darkest hour of Earth's desperation that humanity found its spark of unity. Governments, scientists, and military leaders from all corners of the planet realized they had to pool their resources, share their knowledge, and work together in ways they never had before. Time was running out, and Earth's resistance could not afford to squander it. In a small underground bunker deep within what remained of the United States, the world's brightest minds gathered. Among them was Dr. Elena Ruiz, a leading physicist who had been studying Earth's magnetic field and its strange anomalies. During the chaos of the invasion, she'd noticed something odd. The Korath's energy weapons, which seemed so invincible at first, had one significant weakness. Each weapon was linked to a vast, intricate network of energy sources deep within their ships, a network vulnerable to disruption. If they could somehow manipulate Earth's magnetic field, they could throw the Korath's advanced technology into disarray. But to do that, they would need a weapon of unimaginable scale, something that could tap into the very core of the planet itself. The team was skeptical. It was one of those desperate ideas born out of last-ditch survival. Still, the alternative, doing nothing, was far worse. So they went forward, assembling a daring plan to exploit Earth's unique, unexplained energy field. They called it Project Corpulse. As Dr. Ruiz and her team worked tirelessly to unlock the mysteries of the planet's inner energy, the Korath seemed more than content to destroy. In major cities around the world, human pockets of resistance fought back, using any scrap of technology they could find to create rudimentary weapons and traps. They were losing, but they were fighting back. And while the Korath's commanders were confident of victory, their arrogance began to show. Meanwhile, on the war-torn streets of Paris, Captain Sarah Avery and her team led a small but crucial operation to steal Korath technology and learn more about the invaders' weak spots. This was a high-risk mission, but the human forces had grown accustomed to these kinds of operations. Under the cover of night, Avery and her unit infiltrated a Korath supply depot in the heart of the city. The mission was a success, and they returned with critical data that would prove vital to Earth's counteroffensive. The stolen data revealed the Korath's greatest vulnerability, their reliance on a mysterious crystalline energy source that powered not only their weapons but their entire fleet. If humanity could destroy or disrupt these crystals, the Korath's might would be severely crippled. But even with this newfound knowledge, time was running out. The Korath had already started their second wave of destruction, an all-out assault on the remaining human strongholds. Earth's forces were scattered, their resources dwindling, and their options narrowing. Project Corpulse was Earth's last hope, but the risks were immeasurable. The weapon they needed would be a volatile, unstable force, a singular burst of energy that could either cripple the Korath or obliterate the planet. But with nothing else to lose, Dr. Ruiz and her team decided to move forward. In an underground facility somewhere in the middle of the Brazilian Amazon, the project began. They built a colossal machine that would harness Earth's magnetic field, funnel it into the planet's molten core, and then release a pulse of energy powerful enough to disrupt the Korath's crystal energy network. They had no guarantees that it would work, and there was a very real possibility that it would tear the planet apart. But humanity had always been at its strongest when it was faced with impossible odds. Captain Avery, now stationed in the newly established Resistance Command in the Rocky Mountains, received word of the final stages of Project Corpulse. She knew that the Korath were preparing their decisive assault on the last human stronghold. It would only be a matter of hours before they arrived in full force, and Earth would have no defense left. But now, the fate of humanity rested on one question. Could Project Corpulse work in time to turn the tide? With the Korath advancing and Earth's resources stretched thin, the decision was made. They would activate the weapon. There was no turning back now. The plan was set into motion. Across the globe, resistance forces fought with renewed determination, knowing that the pulse from the core would either save them or doom them. The Korath might have the firepower to destroy humanity, but they had underestimated the unyielding will of the human race. And now, it was time for Earth to strike back. As the Korath ships appeared on the horizon, their dark silhouettes blotting out the sky, the countdown began. The last hope of a planet, desperate and determined, was about to be unleashed. The ground trembled beneath the surface of the Earth as the colossal machine, buried deep in the Amazon jungle, hummed to life. Miles away, in the heart of Earth's last remaining stronghold, Captain Sarah Avery watched the sky darken with the shadows of Korath warships. The battle for Earth had reached its most desperate point. The Korath had long since ignored any form of resistance, their sole focus now on annihilating humanity and claiming the planet for their own. It seemed inevitable, until the strange energy pulse beneath their feet began to take effect. In the hidden underground facility, Dr. Elena Ruiz monitored the activation of the Corpulse device. The massive machine had been designed to tap into Earth's magnetic field and draw power from the planet's core, something no one had ever thought possible. The machine's massive energy reservoir, which would draw on the Earth's own magnetic field, was now fully charged, and the countdown began. The goal was to release a massive, disruptive pulse that would target the Korath's crystal-based energy system, something they had discovered only weeks earlier from their stolen data. This pulse would not only knock out the Korath's advanced technology, it would create a shockwave that could cripple their forces across the globe. But as the countdown ticked closer to zero, Dr. Ruiz couldn't shake the gnawing doubt in the pit of her stomach. The weapon, while potentially their greatest asset, was also their greatest gamble. The pulse might not work at all, or it could backfire, causing irreparable damage to the Earth itself. For the first time, she considered the horrifying possibility that the weapon could destroy them all. There was no way to know for sure. But at this point, failure wasn't an option. Humanity was running out of time. Meanwhile, the Korath army, led by their ruthless General Frax, prepared to deliver their final, crushing blow to Earth. They had underestimated humanity's resolve at every turn, and now they were growing frustrated. Their forces had been dealing with constant skirmishes and sabotage, but the resistance was proving more difficult to eradicate than expected. The Korath had planned to deploy their full might, an orbital bombardment followed by a ground assault, to finish the war in one swift stroke. The Earth's remaining cities would be leveled, and humanity would be crushed beneath the weight of the Korath's unrelenting power. But then, just as the Korath ships descended upon their targets, something unprecedented happened. A brilliant burst of energy erupted from the depths of the planet's core, surging outward with unimaginable force. The pulse, larger and more powerful than anything Dr. Ruiz and her team had anticipated, shot into the atmosphere like a violent storm. It radiated outward in all directions, a shimmering wave of energy that disrupted every Korath system it touched. The warships stalled mid-flight as their engines sputtered and sparked, their weaponry suddenly rendered useless. Communication channels went silent. The Korath soldiers on the ground staggered, disoriented, and confused, as their once mighty armor malfunctioned and fell apart. The Korath had been blindsided. The pulse from the Earth's core had hit their technology with devastating precision. Their once unassailable fleet was crippled, their ground forces scattered. But it didn't end there. The pulse began to reverberate through the Earth itself, shaking the planet with a force so strong that entire mountain ranges quaked and buildings miles away from the epicenter collapsed under the strain. It wasn't just the Korath's technology that had been disrupted. Earth itself seemed to be fighting back. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity saw hope. The Korath, now facing a sudden and unforeseen technological collapse, began to panic. Their commanders struggled to regain control of their ships, but they were losing communication, and their forces were retreating. The tide had turned, but it wasn't over. Earth had struck back, but the battle was far from won. The Korath, though crippled, were still formidable, and the full weight of their wrath would soon descend on the planet. It was a temporary victory, and Earth's resistance had to capitalize on it quickly. Captain Avery, watching from her command post, felt a surge of adrenaline as she saw Korath forces falter. She knew this was the break they had been waiting for, but it was also their most dangerous moment. The pulse had caused chaos, but it wouldn't last long. The Korath would regroup. They always did. "Now we hit them hard," she said, her voice steady as the room filled with her team's renewed energy. "We move now before they can adapt. We have one shot at this." As the countdown reached its final seconds, the resistance forces on the ground launched their counteroffensive. With the Korath temporarily crippled, Earth's military forces, once scattered and disjointed, now fought with a newfound determination. They pushed forward, striking Korath positions with precision. The stolen Korath technology, once thought of as a valuable prize for the enemy, now became the key to Earth's victory. Improvised weaponry, combined with the malfunctioning Korath systems, gave humans a fighting chance. The war was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, humanity had the upper hand. The Korath were reeling, and the universe had learned one important lesson. Earth would never be easy to conquer. It would never be the helpless, backwater planet they thought it was. The fight for Earth had just begun, and humanity's resilience was a force to be reckoned with. In the wake of the unexpected victory, humanity found itself riding a wave of renewed hope. The pulse from Earth's core had done more than just cripple the Korath's technology. It had sent a clear message. Earth was not the defenseless, insignificant planet the Korath had believed it to be. For the first time, the invaders were on the back foot, scrambling to regain control of their failing systems. Earth's resistance forces, emboldened by the success, pressed their advantage. But even as the battle raged on, a darker truth began to emerge from the depths of the Korath's shattered empire. Dr. Elena Ruiz, still in the heart of the underground facility in Brazil, worked furiously with her team to study the data they had gathered from the Korath's technology. What they discovered in the wake of the disruption was unsettling, a hidden truth about the invaders that no one had expected. The Korath, it turned out, were not conquerors by choice. Dr. Ruiz sat at a terminal, her fingers trembling as she pieced together the fragmented intelligence from the Korath's now-defunct systems. A transmission intercepted just before their communications went silent contained a confession from a Korath commander, one that had been sent to high-ranking officials in their home fleet. As she read the encrypted message, the gravity of the revelation sank in. The Korath were not a race of cold-blooded conquerors. They were refugees, survivors of a war so devastating that their homeworld had been completely annihilated. The Korath had been forced to flee their dying planet, seeking refuge on any habitable world they could find. But their story didn't end there. The Korath had been running for generations, pursued relentlessly by a terrifying species, the Vigar. The Vigar were a race of perfect hunters, known throughout the galaxy for their brutal efficiency and insatiable thirst for extermination. The Korath's warlike nature had been forged not from a desire to conquer, but from the desperate need to survive. For centuries, they had evaded the Vigar, pillaging worlds for resources, stealing what they needed to fuel their flight, but they had never been able to outrun their pursuers. The Vigar were relentless, and they were closing in. The truth shook Dr. Ruiz to her core. The Korath, with all their aggression and brutality, had been driven by fear. Fear of the perfect hunters who would not stop until every last Korath was dead. The realization sparked a new dilemma for the resistance. Were the Korath truly their enemies, or were they simply desperate survivors, doing whatever it took to evade extinction? Word of the discovery spread quickly throughout the resistance forces. Some, like Captain Sarah Avery, hardened by months of fighting, dismissed the revelation as irrelevant. The Korath had invaded Earth. They were the enemy. Nothing could justify the destruction they had wrought upon the planet. Humanity's survival depended on eliminating them. But there were others, like Dr. Ruse, who saw the moral implications of what they had learned. We're fighting the Korath, but what if we're only a part of something much larger? Dr. Ruiz had asked during an emergency council meeting, if the Vigar are as deadly as the Korath say, then maybe we're not just dealing with invaders. We're dealing with a galaxy that's at war. And we're caught in the middle. Captain Avery listened, her face hard with resolve, but even she couldn't shake the unease that the discovery had planted. We don't have the luxury of moral debates right now, Elena. The Korath attacked us. They destroyed our cities. We can't afford to question their motives. But the question remained. If the Korath were not the true enemy, if their invasion was a desperate attempt to survive, could Earth justify wiping them out without understanding the full scope of the situation? As the resistance forces pressed forward with their campaign, a decision loomed over humanity's path. The Korath were faltering, their technology in ruins, but they were still dangerous. Could they be reasoned with? Could humanity use this knowledge to negotiate a truce, or would they push forward with the war, annihilating a race driven by fear, not malice? Meanwhile, General Vrax, leader of the Korath forces, was aware of the growing unrest within his ranks. Many of his soldiers, having tasted defeat, were questioning their purpose, their mission. The tension among the Korath was palpable. Some whispered of abandoning the fight altogether and fleeing into the depths of space. They had lost their homeworld to the Vigar, and now their very survival was in question. The revelation of their plight had begun to tear their unity apart. But General Vrax had no intention of surrender. He was a soldier, born and bred for war, and the thought of defeat was unacceptable. Even in the face of growing internal dissent, he knew one thing. If the Korath didn't hold their ground, the Vigar would finish what they had started. There was no escaping that fate. The truth, then, was more complex than anyone on Earth could have imagined. The Korath were not the true evil. The Vigar were the true monsters, and they were coming. With the Korath's secret laid bare, humanity's fight had taken on a new dimension. The enemy they had been fighting might not be the real threat after all. The true test was yet to come, and Earth's fragile hope rested on one question. Could humanity face the Vigar, and if so, how could they possibly win? The uneasy truce within the Korath ranks began to fray at the edges as the truth about their plight spread. Some of their soldiers began to question their leaders, their mission, and the cost of the lives lost on both sides. But General Vrax remained steadfast, his grip on the Korath forces tightening. The Vigar were coming, and no matter the internal turmoil, the Korath had one goal left: survival. On Earth, the revelation of the Vigar's existence sent shockwaves through the resistance. Humanity had fought tooth and nail against the Korath invaders, but now they were faced with an even greater, more terrifying enemy. The Vigar were known throughout the galaxy as the perfect hunters, ruthless and efficient. Nothing escaped their pursuit. The thought of facing such a species filled the leaders of Earth's resistance with dread, but the information from Dr. Ruiz was clear. The Korath were simply the victims of a much larger predator. If humanity didn't act quickly, they would find themselves as the next target of the Vigar's deadly crusade. Captain Sarah Avery convened a council of the most senior resistance leaders, Dr. Ruiz among them, to discuss the situation. The conference room, once filled with the energy of rebellion, now buzzed with the weight of uncertainty. We've been fighting for survival, but now we're faced with something far worse, Avery said, her voice uncharacteristically heavy. The Korath may have been our enemies, but if we let them fall, we're handing the universe's deadliest species the keys to Earth. We cannot afford that. Dr. Ruiz nodded, her brow furrowed with worry. The Vigar are no myth. Their reputation is legendary. The Korath's desperation might have led them to attack us, but we're not the ones they're really afraid of. If we destroy the Korath, the Vigar will come here next. We will be next on their list. The room was filled with murmurs of disbelief. It was one thing to face the Korath, who were ruthless but desperate. But the Vigar were something else entirely. Earth's forces, exhausted and overwhelmed, had barely managed to fend off the Korath. How could they possibly face the true enemy? A voice from the back of the room broke the silence. General Marcus Holbrook, a grizzled veteran of countless wars, spoke with grim resolve. We don't have a choice. We either make a stand against the Vigar, or we perish like the Korath. I suggest we focus on making sure Earth's defense systems are in place for the inevitable. Holbrook's words echoed in the minds of everyone present. There was no room for doubt now. Earth's survival depended on a decision, and time was running out. But just as the Council began to discuss strategies for preparing Earth's defenses, a chilling communication came through from the Korath. A broadcast, relayed directly to Earth's Resistance Command, played across every screen in the command center. General Vrax's face appeared on the screen, his expression cold and determined. "This is General Vrax of the Korath Empire," he said, his voice harsh and metallic. "I speak for my people, who have been hunted for millennia. I know that you despise us, and that we are the ones who brought this war to your doorstep. But understand this, what you have just learned about the Vigar is only the beginning. They are coming, and they will not stop until every living thing in their path is destroyed." A murmur of disbelief ran through the resistance. General Vrax continued, his tone darkening. "We are not your enemy. The Vigar are. If you wish to have any hope of surviving what is coming, you must form an alliance with us. Together, we stand a chance against the perfect hunters. Alone, you will be wiped out." Vrax's message ended with a cold finality, the image of his face disappearing from the screens. The room fell into stunned silence as the resistance leaders processed his words. The Korath, enemies of humanity only days before, were now offering an alliance, one that could mean the difference between life and death. For a long moment, no one spoke. Captain Avery stood, her mind racing with the implications of this unexpected proposal. The idea of joining forces with the very species that had devastated their world was abhorrent, but the alternative was worse. The Vigar were not just conquerors, they were annihilators. If they arrived on Earth, humanity would be wiped out in an instant. "Can we trust them?" Dr. Ruse finally asked, her voice breaking the silence. "It doesn't matter," Captain Avery replied, her voice hardening with resolve. "If we don't, we all die. We have no choice. We need to ally with the Korath, and together, we'll face the Vigar head-on. There's no other option." And so, against every instinct and every ounce of pride, Earth's resistance agreed to forge an uneasy alliance with the Korath. It was a dangerous gamble, but humanity had already defied the odds once. With the Vigar coming, they had no other choice but to fight alongside their former enemies. They would face the perfect hunters together, or die trying. As the resistance forces began to integrate with the Korath, working alongside them to prepare for the coming battle, a new tension emerged. Both sides, once fierce enemies, were now forced into an alliance that would test their resolve. Would they fight side by side, united in the face of annihilation? Or would distrust and old wounds tear them apart before they could even face the Vigar? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. The true war had only just begun. The uneasy alliance between the Korath and humanity had been forged out of necessity, not trust. Earth's forces, still battered and worn from their initial resistance against the Korath invasion, now found themselves in an even more precarious position, caught between two deadly enemies. As humanity's combined forces with the Korath began to prepare for the Vigar's inevitable arrival, tensions simmered just beneath the surface. Old wounds ran deep, and both sides were wary of the other. But the Vigar, relentless and methodical, were coming. time was a luxury they no longer had. In the command center of the newly established Joint Operations Base, an underground complex carved deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Captain Sarah Avery oversaw the coordination of Earth's military forces alongside their Korath counterparts. The base, once a symbol of humanity's last stand, now became the focal point of their combined efforts. The cavernous room was filled with the buzz of activity, soldiers working together, exchanging technology, and planning battle strategies. General Vrax, despite his arrogance and distrust of humanity's abilities, had reluctantly agreed to collaborate with Earth's military leaders. His Korath officers, too, were equally suspicious of their human allies. But they had no choice. The Vigar were a force unlike anything they had ever encountered. Though they had fought numerous enemies in their own empire, the Korath knew they were no match for the perfect hunters. This time, they would need human ingenuity, their adaptability, and their sheer will to survive. Dr. Elena Ruiz, meanwhile, worked tirelessly with her Korath counterparts to analyze the data from the pulse weapon that had disabled much of their technology. The Korath were still grappling with the aftershocks of the blast, their once mighty systems in disarray. Earth's team had been quick to capitalize on this vulnerability, hacking into their systems to disable key weapons and communication networks. But it was only a temporary fix. The Korath needed a new strategy, one that could buy them enough time to defend against the Vigar. "We have to build a weapon," Dr. Ruse said, her voice a blend of determination and caution as she stood at a holographic display of the Korath's remaining fleet, "something to level the playing field. We've seen what their technology can do, but we can't just rely on our magnetic pulse again. That was a fluke. If we're going to win this war, we need to upgrade our tactics, and fast." Her words echoed in the minds of the resistance leaders. They had already pushed the limits of their scientific knowledge to disable Korath technology, but against the Vigar, who were rumored to possess technology far beyond anything the galaxy had seen, it wasn't enough. They would need a weapon that could not only defend Earth, but also counter the Vigar's perfect hunting methods. Meanwhile, across the compound, Captain Avery paced back and forth, her mind racing. It had been days since the alliance had been formed, but the reality of fighting alongside the Korath still felt like a nightmare. Her unit, once proud and independent, now found themselves working side by side with soldiers who had once been their sworn enemies. The Korath's distrust was palpable, none more so than General Vrax himself. Despite his offers of temporary cooperation, Avery could sense his deep-seated belief that humanity was expendable, a tool to be discarded once the Vigar threat had passed. But for now, they needed each other. If they didn't find a way to work together, they would both be doomed. Avery had learned to read people in her years of service, and she could tell that the Korath were not fully committed to this alliance. The Korath soldiers trained alongside Earth's forces, but they moved like machines, efficient, calculating, but lacking the spark of human creativity and adaptability. They followed orders without question, but there was little to no camaraderie between the two factions. There were moments when Captain Avery found herself questioning the wisdom of this alliance, but when she looked out at the horizon, at the darkening sky that signaled the coming storm, she knew that there was no choice. The Vigar were coming. They would destroy everything in their path, and humanity had no hope of surviving alone. As Avery stood by the large strategic map of the planet, Dr. Ruse entered the command center, her face drawn with exhaustion. "We've found something," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of excitement and caution. "What is it?" Avery asked, turning to face her. "Something in the Korath archives. An old weapon prototype," Dr. Ruse explained. "It's an energy cannon, capable of focusing a massive burst of energy. The Korath developed it before their empire fell apart, but they never completed it. If we can finish the design, it could be powerful enough to strike down the Vigar, but it's going to require significant work, and we don't have much time." Avery's mind raced as she considered the implications. The weapon could be a game changer, but it was risky. The Vigar were known for their ability to adapt quickly, and they would likely have countermeasures against any new threat. Still, it was their best shot at leveling the playing field. "Get me the Korath engineers," Avery said, her tone decisive. "We need to make this happen. Now." As the clock ticked down to the inevitable arrival of the Vigar, the Resistance redoubled its efforts. The alliance between humanity and the Korath was not one of trust or respect, but survival. And as Earth's military forces and Korath engineers worked day and night to complete the energy cannon, the question on everyone's mind was not whether they could succeed, but whether they could even hold their ground when the perfect hunters descended upon them. The gathering storm had begun, and there was no turning back. The days blurred into nights as Earth's resistance forces and the Korath worked feverishly to complete the energy cannon. The alliance, still fraught with tension, was held together only by their shared desperation. Every day that passed brought the Vigar closer, and every minute felt like an eternity. The energy cannon was their last hope, a weapon powerful enough to disrupt the Vigar's near-impervious technology and give humanity a fighting chance. Captain Sarah Avery stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of Earth's defenses. The Vigar's fleet was fast approaching, and there was no time to waste. The energy cannon, still in its early stages, was their only answer. If it worked, it would release a concentrated burst of energy capable of incapacitating even the Vigar's advanced shields. If it didn't, Earth would fall and humanity would be wiped out. "Captain," Dr. Elena Ruiz's voice broke through her thoughts. "We're making progress, but we're not there yet. The weapon isn't fully calibrated, and the Korath engineers are stretched thin. We need more time." Avery glanced at her. "We don't have more time. The Vigar are only days away. We need to make this work." Dr. Ruiz hesitated, then spoke with the grim realism that had become second nature to her. "If we rush it, we risk malfunctioning it. And the last thing we need is a failure at the worst possible moment." The room was tense, each of them aware that they were standing on the edge of a precipice. The Vigar were coming, and with their reputation for precision and efficiency, failure was not an option. Meanwhile, the Korath, still visibly uncomfortable in their alliance with humanity, were working with a focused intensity that mirrored the urgency in the command center. General Vrax, despite his cold demeanor, seemed almost eager to see the weapon completed. The thought of using it against the Vigar, his true enemies, seemed to ignite something deep within him. His hatred for the Vigar burned hotter than ever, and he was willing to put aside his distrust of the humans for a chance to strike back at the galaxy's greatest predators. Yet even with the weapon nearing completion, the Resistance knew that the Vigar weren't just a military force. They were predators, supreme hunters who thrived on tracking and eliminating their prey. The Korath, with their brutal tactics and warlike culture, had never faced an enemy quite like the Vigar. It wasn't just a matter of brute force. It was a matter of outwitting an enemy that had spent millennia perfecting the art of the hunt. Dr. Ruiz, after another long night in the lab, came to Avery with more disturbing news. "We've intercepted some transmissions. The Vigar know about us. They've been tracking the Korath for years, and now they've set their sights on Earth." Avery's heart sank. "How much time do we have?" "Less than 48 hours, Ruiz replied, her voice tense with fear. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting to prevent an extinction-level event. If the Vigar arrive here, they won't just destroy our cities. They'll wipe out every trace of humanity and the Korath. Our only chance is to finish this weapon in time." The weight of those words hung heavily in the air. The stakes had never been higher. Earth wasn't just facing an enemy fleet. They were facing a species that was practically a force of nature, an enemy that would stop at nothing until every living being on Earth was eradicated. General Vrax's voice crackled over the comms. "We've finished the final checks on the weapon systems. It's ready. But I must warn you, this weapon won't guarantee victory. The Vigar adapt quickly. We may only have one shot." Avery's jaw tightened. She had heard the rumors of the Vigar's power. of their ability to anticipate and counter every move their enemies made. The Vigar weren't just soldiers. They were predators, and Earth was their prey. The thought of facing them in battle made her heart race, but there was no turning back now. "We have to take the shot," Avery said firmly. "We can't afford to hesitate." The plan was set into motion. The Resistance, bolstered by the reluctant Korath alliance, would take the fight to the skies. The combined fleet of human and Korath warships, equipped with makeshift technology and bolstered by the newly constructed energy cannon, would engage the Vigar head-on. Their goal was clear: strike first and strike hard. As the fleet assembled in orbit above Earth, the sheer scale of the coming battle began to take shape. The Vigar's warships, sleek and deadly, had already appeared on the edge of Earth's atmosphere. The Vigar had arrived, and there was no more time for hesitation. Earth's resistance had to act now, or it would be too late. The combined fleet, humans and Korath, allies for the first time in their history, launched toward the Vigar ships. The energy cannon, strapped to one of the human battleships, glowed with a power that could shake the stars themselves. As the fleet drew closer, General Vrax's voice echoed in Avery's earpiece, a cold reminder of what was at stake. "Remember, Captain, this is not just a fight for Earth. This is a fight for survival against a species that hunts without mercy. We are the last bastion. We must not fail." The silence that followed his words was deafening. The first shots of the battle rang out across the cold vacuum of space. The Vigar had made their move, and humanity's final stand had begun. But even as the battle raged, one question lingered in the hearts of every soldier, every officer, every leader. Would the weapon work? Would the combined might of humanity and the Korath be enough to stop the perfect hunters? Or would they fall to the ruthless, unrelenting predators from the stars? The battle above Earth was unlike anything humanity or the Korath had ever faced. The Vigar warships, sleek and deadly, moved with terrifying precision, their shields deflecting every attack the combined human Korath fleet threw at them. Their ships were faster, more advanced, and adapted to each strike within moments. It was clear this was not a battle of technology alone. This was a fight for survival, a fight where only the most cunning, the most ruthless, would emerge victorious. Captain Sarah Avery stood on the bridge of the Valor, the flagship of Earth's resistance fleet. Her eyes were fixed on the holographic display showing the vast expanse of space, now filled with the deadly Vigar ships. Her stomach churned with anxiety, but she kept her composure, knowing that the fate of her world and the Korath depended on her leadership. "Targeting systems are locked," a technician reported. "Energy cannon is fully charged, ready to fire on your command, Captain." Avery's fingers hovered over the controls, but her gaze flickered to the other Korath ships, now positioned alongside humanity's vessels. General Vrax's fleet was holding its ground, but there was no telling how long they could keep up the defense. The Vigar were relentless, their ships impossibly maneuverable, and their weapons nearly impossible to counter. The Korath and human forces were already beginning to suffer casualties. "I'm not going to wait for them to take us down," Avery said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Fire the cannon." The Valor's massive energy cannon hummed with power, the energy core at its heart glowing an intense blue. In an instant, the cannon discharged, sending a massive burst of energy hurtling toward the closest Vigar warship. The shot hit with devastating force, sending shockwaves through the space around it. For a moment, it seemed as if they might have succeeded. The Vigar ship staggered, its shields flickering. But within seconds, the ship repaired itself, and the shields came back online. That didn't even faze them. A Korath officer growled from across the room. "Their technology adapts too quickly. It's like they know what we're going to do before we do it." Avery clenched her jaw. They had hoped that the energy cannon, with its concentrated burst of power, would be the weapon that could breach the Vigar's seemingly invincible defenses. But the Vigar were already anticipating it. "Captain," Dr. Ruse's voice crackled through the comms, They're using their adaptive shielding. We can't keep using the same strategy. We need to think outside the box. Avery thought for a moment. Adapt. The Vigar were perfect hunters, yes, but they were also predictable in their ruthlessness. They were creatures of instinct, honed by millennia of survival. They could anticipate, but could they react to something completely unexpected? Lock onto their lid ship's engines, Avery ordered. Don't fire directly at the shields. Target their propulsion system. The technician at the helm quickly adjusted the targeting systems. Locked on. Captain. Fire. This time, the cannon's energy burst was focused on the vulnerable propulsion systems of the lead Vigar ship. The shot hit its mark. And this time, the Vigar ship didn't repair itself. The blast tore through its engines, causing the ship to momentarily lose power and spiral toward the dark expanse of space. The Vigar fleet faltered for the briefest moment, a crack in their impenetrable armor. Direct hit. Their lead ships lost propulsion. A crew member shouted, hope lighting their faces. But the victory was short-lived. The Vigar, enraged by the loss of their flagship, retaliated with terrifying fury. A barrage of plasma missiles and energy beams rained down on the Valor and the Korath vessels, creating massive explosions in the vacuum of space. The Korath ships held their ground, but humanity's fleet was beginning to crumble. One by one, their ships were destroyed or incapacitated. Avery watched in horror as the Valor shook from the impact of enemy fire. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to maintain control. She had always known the cost of war, but seeing her comrades, human and Korath alike, sacrificing themselves to give Earth a fighting chance struck her like a physical blow. They were fighting not just for their survival, but for the survival of everything they held dear. General Vrax, Avery said, her voice grim. It's time. We can't win this with firepower alone. We need to combine our forces, launch everything we have left at their flagship, together, now. Vrax's cold voice echoed in her earpiece. We fight to the last, Captain. I will not leave the field. My people will follow. Avery gave a sharp nod. She understood. It was now or never. Together, the remaining ships, human and Korath, launched a final, coordinated assault. They combined their last reserves of energy, directing every weapon they had at the Vigar flagship. The energy cannon on the Valor fired again, this time in unison with the Korath's heavy artillery, and for the first time, they saw a crack in the Vigar's armor. The Vigar flagship shuddered, then exploded in a burst of light and debris, its once impenetrable shields failing under the combined assault. The remaining Vigar ships hesitated for the briefest moment, just enough time for the last of Earth's and the Korath's forces to strike. The battle raged for hours, but when the smoke cleared, it was over. The Vigar were not entirely defeated, but their fleet had been shattered, their flagship destroyed. The hunters had become the hunted. Captain Avery stood among the wreckage of the battle, her face smeared with soot and blood. Earth had won, for now. But she knew this victory came at a tremendous cost. The alliance between humanity and the Korath had held, and together they had turned the tide. Yet the war was not over. The Vigar were still out there, and though they had been struck down, they would never stop hunting. But Earth had proven something. Humanity was not just a survivor. They were a force to be reckoned with. The universe had wanted peace, but now it would learn that humanity would fight for its survival, and when pushed to the edge, it would strike back with everything it had.